I'm Sam Bear for Class Winners Collector Vehicles, and it's time to have some fun till Daddy takes the T-Bird away. There is nothing more 1950s American than a Ford Thunderbird. And in this case, it's the first year of the baby bird generation, the 1955. The baby birds were the small two-seat Thunderbirds that went from 55 through 56 and 57 before being replaced by the square birds, four-seaters, in 1958. These things are so beautiful. They're almost perfect in their looks. There's a reason that millions of people over decades and decades and decades have looked at this and just drooled, especially in this Ford Thunderbird blue, which is actually kind of a blue-green. It just has everything in the right place when you look at it. Now, how do you tell a 55 from a 56 from a 57? Well, telling a 55 is actually pretty easy. First, on the front, you have these Y8 badges on the flanks. Now, as you go back, the easier way to tell is a 56 will actually have a Continental kit with a spare tire on the back, because in the 55s, the trunks are pretty small. So they put the Continental kit on back for 56, but that changed the handling. Now, 57 is an entirely more creased look, different body lines, still around the same size, but you can easily tell them apart. But this is the first year 55, and it's great. So let's drive it. A lot of people love hardtops, but I'll tell you, if you're 6'4" like I am, the first time you try to get into a Ford Thunderbird with a hardtop, or even the soft top up, you realize that it's a nightmare. Watch your knee and shin. Oh, it's tight in here. Once you get inside, it's okay, but I admit, I want to take the top off. But before we do that, we got to get it up to the shop, because it's an operation to lift this heavy hardtop up. So let's get it started. Easiest way to get the key in for me is, well, go through the steering wheel and up. And it's got a great theft protection for modern car thieves. Try to turn it on while it's in park, nothing. You got to put the gear selector into neutral. That'll engage the starter. And remember, this is a 6-volt system, so it never wants to start really well, even when it's warm out. And that's why in 1956, Ford went to the 12-volt system and made starting a lot easier. All right, let's get this hardtop off. Inevitably, the first thing that comes up is it a sports car? Is it a personal luxury car? Let's get this straight. Ford marketed as a personal luxury car. But by all definitions, it's really a sports car. And there's a very specific reason why Ford didn't want to call it a sports car. Because the Corvette had been out for 2 years and had done dismally. And Ford knew that the market for sports cars in America was not particularly big. So they wanted to get the people who wanted more than just side curtains, that wanted roll-up windows, that wanted some luxury to their sport. But make no bones about it, this has sports car credentials. And the fact that 55 through 57 T-Birds were not only raced at the drag strips, but on road racing circuits around the country. And they did quite well. You know how you can prove that the Thunderbirds are great cars, just do a Google search on the number of early rock and roll songs that featured Thunderbird in them. Where the T-Bird really shines, and where I just love this, is just out on these 45, 50 mile an hour roads. The thing just cruises beautifully. I mean, it's exactly what you want, and that's why they're so popular on car tours and show and shines. They're beautiful. They're comfortable if you fit, and even if you don't, you can get comfortable enough. I mean, they're just well-designed cars, and they're easy to work on. The parts are available. There we go. So, powering the 1955 Thunderbird is Ford's Y-block 292 V8. That was the only engine that was offered that year. When paired to the automatic transmission, it made 198 horsepower. If you got the 3-speed manual with the overdrive, which was the standard transmission, you got 5 horsepower less and 6 pound-feet of torque less than an automatic. In terms of straight line performance, 0 to 60, about 11.5 seconds according to most contemporary tests. Now that puts it in true sports car territory of the era. I mean, when you consider that the hairy-chested Triumph TR2 was about 12.2 seconds to 60, these are actually pretty fast, and about as fast as a V8 Corvette of the era. They're about the same horsepower. Thunderbird weighs a couple hundred pounds more because it's about half a foot longer. Corvette is wider, but at the end of the day, they're very similar to drive. Now, where the Thunderbird obviously has the Corvette, especially in 1955, is on amenities. So with this car, you get power roll-up windows. You also get power seats that will go forward and back and up and down. So ergonomically, the Thunderbird with its top off it's okay. It's still tough to get in and out with the way the doors are cut, but it's okay. Seats are flat, you kind of move around, but there's a little bit more legroom in here than in a 55 Corvette. Where the Thunderbird shines is in the style department. I mean, this engine turned dashboard, you got a tack, you got a clock. But the Thunderbird is surprisingly good to drive. It has a solid rear axle and independent front suspension. And with radial tires, it's a little less bouncy and a little less roll. It's not a car that really fits a modern definition of sports car, but it's engaging enough. Now, this car does not have the optional power steering. So steering's a little bit heavier and a little more direct. But, let's kick it up the hill. It takes hard corners with relative ease, especially compared to its contemporaries. It's a car that you can blast down a secondary road, but remember, it's still a 50s car, so it's somewhat wide and it's somewhat heavy. When it comes to braking, you pretty much know what you're gonna get in 1955. It's gonna be a firm pedal and a wild ride. And the Thunderbird's no different. So let's give it a shot here. 1, 2, 3. actually, you know, they're pretty good. So, unless you're driving a 1955 Austin Healey 100S, you know you have drum brakes all around, because except for the Healey and, well, some of the Crossleys a few years before, everything else had drum brakes. And it works, well, they work pretty well. Actually, pedal feel is very firm, but very direct. And again, this car does not have the optional power brakes. But that's okay, they work. Now, would I want to take this down Pikes Peak? Probably not. But, you know, it would do it. You just have to be cautious about brake fade. Confusion abounds about baby birds and the hard top. So, first of all, no, not all baby birds are supposed to have a hard top with a porthole. In actuality, the hard top came standard from the factory, starting in 1955. For a no-cost substitution, you could have a soft top instead of a hard top. But in 1955, there was no porthole on the hard top. Some cars opted for an extra cost to have both a hard and a soft top. This car only has a hard top. Behind the seat, the folding soft top frame does not exist. And that, for warm weather climates or for people who wanted the Thunderbird as a second car, that was a popular specification. Now, in 1956, there was an option to get the porthole on the hard top, but not all 56s or 57s had that porthole. So don't use it to try to identify a car. Also, because the porthole was often retrofitted to cars that were built in 1955 and shouldn't have had them. Still, it's a cool look, but it does not necessarily define how good a car is. I tell you, you drive this T-Bird and it just makes everybody happy. And how could you not be happy? It's beautiful, it's comfortable, it's fun even in the tight corners, and it's iconic. So, for Class Winners Collector Vehicles, I'm the CEO and car guy in chief, Sam Bear. Life's too short for ordinary cars. So, sometimes go back to the 50s and pick up something iconic from that era, and all the great nostalgia comes rushing back, even if you're like I am and I wasn't alive for when it was new. It takes you to a different time, but still, it feeds the soul. Love it.